Hi, I'm Kim Sealing-Smith, CEO of Ignite Global and Future of Work expert. I'm really excited to be sharing a simple, practical, and effective model to disrupt your old school people practices and help you build and retain your 2030 workforce. I'm going to be speaking fairly fast today and packing in loads of tips. So the best way to watch this video is to shut everything else down on your computer or device and to follow along using a handout that I've prepared. I'll share the link with you for that handout in a moment. But first, I want to tell you why I'm really here. You see, I want to help you avoid your Kodak moment. No, not the moment that you remember from the Kodak ad campaign from decades ago, where they encouraged you to savor your precious moments using their Kodak film. No, the Kodak moment that I want to help you avoid is that moment in January 2012 when Kodak went from having an 80% market share in the United States and 50% globally to going bankrupt. Now, it's easy to dismiss Kodak's story as one of digital disruption, but that actually doesn't do it justice because Kodak actually had the first prototype of the digital camera starting in 1975 and invested billions of dollars in research in digital technology. As a matter of fact, Kodak had the first online photo site. But Kodak was disrupted, and it was disrupted by a change in paradigm. Not the paradigm of how their customers wanted to take pictures, but the paradigm in how they wanted to share their pictures. Because Kodak's idea for their photo online website was to upload them to the cloud and to download them to print them. So they missed that consumer demand paradigm shift, that trend. And that's what kills many businesses, old paradigm thinking. Disruption is everywhere, and every company or industry that's been disrupted has been stuck in old paradigm thinking. When we talk about disruption, we usually talk about how automation and digitization are disruptive, and it is. Technology changes how we do what we do and what we need from our human staff. It requires us to rethink how we shape our roles, recruit, and promote staff. But technology is not the only disruption that businesses will face in the coming decade, or are facing now. There are two other disruptions that will be equally impactful. In fact, we're in the middle of a huge disruption, which is why I'm appearing on video instead of live in front of you. Obviously, I'm talking about coronavirus or COVID-19. Which brings me to the second disruption, globalization. Now, I don't just mean global trade and all of the positive and negative that brings. I mean geopolitical realignments, environmental changes, and of course, global pandemics. To compete in a globalized world, organizations need to be more agile and innovative. They need to be able to seize opportunities and ward off challenges. Case in point, office supply stores are currently running out of work from home stock. And as many people that are being required to work from home, people have to be innovative. We need staff in our organizations to be able to come up with innovative solutions on the fly instead of just saying, I don't have the right equipment, I'll just sit this one out. That's not an option, clearly. But the third disruption is where I want to spend my time today, and that's the rise in expectations of an empowered workforce. You see, our people practices were developed in a very different age to the one that we live in now. They were developed during a time where there were more jobs than people. The people did mostly routine, repetitive, and tactical work, and they didn't have to think or to solve problems. And feeling lucky to have a job, they certainly didn't demand anything more. I'll give you an example of this from my own life. I was originally trained as an accountant, and I started work with KPMG. Now, my very first day in accounting, I was asked to foot, or to add up, an inventory register or a stock take, depending on what country you're watching this from, that was about that tall. And I did that with a 10-key calculator and a tape. I don't know how many of you remember those days. Now, of course, new grads from KPMG would not be required to do that now because all of that is automated or sometimes offshored. But that doesn't mean that KPMG or any of the other big four need fewer grads. What that means is that what they need them to do is dramatically different. Today, and at least for the next several decades, barring this little blip that we're in now with the coronavirus, there are more jobs than people. We're in a bit of a bubble right now, as I said, but and this bubble will have economic fallout, but this will pass and the fundamentals are the same. Fundamentally, we will have a strong economy and we're not making more people. By 2030, Korn Ferry estimates that we will have up to 85 million more jobs than people globally, and the US share alone will be up to 6 million. As we've seen, technology and globalization have automated or offshored much of that routine, tactical, and predictable work, and now we require people to be more innovative, creative, and strategic, and they have to be solutions oriented. This requires a different way of managing because our staff are literally using a different part of their brain. The power balance has certainly shifted from company to individual, and our staff want to be treated as people instead of resources. Times have changed, and these are challenging centuries-old paradigms around how we hire and manage staff. And yet, like Kodak, many managers are still operating from this old paradigm. The future of work lies at the intersection of these three disruptions. What I'm going to share with you today is just how you can avoid your own Kodak moment by shifting your paradigm around how you hire and manage staff. This will help at this moment in time while we navigate the global pandemic, but more importantly, well, as importantly at least, it will set you up for success over the next decade so that you and your organization can build and retain the right workforce to handle any other disruptions that are thrown our way through globalization or technology. Today, I will be pulling back that curtain and sharing the unified theory of everything people. This is a model that I developed that disrupts every outdated and ineffective people practice you might still be hanging on to. And the best thing about it, it's actually pretty easy to implement. But it's also really effective. My poster child for this model is a financial services company called First Mortgage. It's owned by American Title, very large company. And this branch has about 450 staff or so. By applying this model, they reduced employee turnover from 45% to 22% within 18 months. This is the model that I'm going to unpack for you step by step so that you can replicate First Mortgage's success. So pause me now to download and print the handout, which you can use to follow along and fill in. There's a bit.ly link right there. Copy and paste it into your browser, type it into your browser, and you might need to change the settings to fit the page depending on which part of the world you live in and whether or not you're using A4 or US letter. Now I warn you, as I said, I'm going to give you as much value as I possibly can and as many practical solutions in the time that we have remaining. I'll be offering you some free resources along the way, as well as the slides, and I'll leave you with a link to download them. Before I talk about the model itself, I want to talk very briefly about how I came up with this model that I teach. First of all, I've had my own consulting firm for the last 11 years, and my team and I have worked across 32 different industries in 9 different countries. I actually split my time between the United States and Australia. Right now, I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, since I didn't have to fly to Las Vegas, but I spend a lot of time in the States, and I've got clients in both countries. But more than our own consulting, I personally do extensive work with Richard Branson's 100% Human at Work initiative, which gives me a seat at the table with some brilliant minds, from Sir Richard himself to a former VP of the World Bank that is in the upper right-hand corner of the top picture, and some incredibly innovative companies doing fantastic work in the people space. Along with that, I've done extensive research into employee experience. 2 years ago, my team and I issued this report. So these aren't just my ideas that I'll share with you today. What I've done with the unified theory is I have packaged up some of the most brilliant minds and innovative ideas from companies into a simple model that will make an immediate impact. So let's get started. As I said before, old school organizational structures and management styles date back to the Industrial Revolution. Originally based on the military, they're hierarchical in nature and top down in form. Managers rely on a command and control style to gain compliance from individuals who do mostly very routine, tactical, and predictable work. They put together very detailed and boring job descriptions with a laundry list of duties and responsibilities, and they try and hold their staff accountable for doing everything on these lists. Now, this worked fairly well for hundreds of years until it didn't. The new way of creating organizational structures and managing staff starts by thinking not about what our staff need to do, but what they need to achieve. Instead of a laundry list of duties and responsibilities, position profiles are now being shaped based on 5 or fewer outcomes with measurable results that are written in real language. So this is how we start the unified theory of everything people. Pause me when you need to so you can fill this out in your handout. So what's the advantage of that? What's the advantage of trading in a laundry list of duties and responsibilities for 5 or fewer outcomes? Well, first of all, it provides clarity and certainty around what success looks like from day one. In fact, before day one, if you advertise these outcomes with these measurable results, you will get fewer candidates responding to your ads, but they'll be better quality. And I've got loads of case studies that back that up. But it also provides a framework to hold your employees, hold your staff accountable for great performance. And it will assist you greatly in managing people who are working from home. Instead of monitoring the time that they have at their desks, you can simply manage the outcomes or the KPIs. But wait, there's more. Not only does the research show that structuring job descriptions based on outcomes instead of tasks increases performance, it improves behavior. Greg McKeown is the author of several books, one of which being Essentialism. Now, Essentialism is a personal productivity book, but in that book, he notes a study that he did with 1,000 different teams, where he looked at teams that had clarity around roles and goals and teams that did not. And what he found was that predictably, the teams that had clarity around roles and goals performed better, but unpredictably, they also behaved better. Because what he found was that the teams that don't have that clarity, they actually, instead of focusing on what they need to achieve to look good in their manager's eyes, they would one-up their colleagues. Now, sometimes this was overtly and sometimes very covertly, but basically, he found a pattern of them throwing their coworkers under the bus to make themselves stand out, make themselves shine. He also found that those employees would promote their own agenda instead of the company's agenda or the team's agenda. So 5 or fewer outcomes increases both performance but also behavior. Pause me now and look at a couple of examples. This is the first one. A couple of examples of target-rich objectives. This is a real client. It's an engineering consulting firm called Lindsay Dinan. And this one is for a civil engineer. So pause me while you take a look at that, and then we'll move on to a sales role. And this is for a salesperson for Software AG, a global software company. And as a matter of fact, this is also a client of mine as well. So pause me again and take a look at these target-rich objectives. Are these different than the objectives you write for your job descriptions? Well, if not, if they're the same, then good for you. You're already doing the very first innovative people practice. Now, the critical skills shortage is making it harder to find people with the right skills and experience. But do you actually want to know a dirty little secret? That was never the right way to hire in the first place. Let me illustrate this by telling you a tale of 2 receptionists. The first one, and these are both stock photos, but they're meant to represent real people. And these 2 people, we'll call one Sarah and one Jay. And Jay is actually his name. It's not a picture of Jay, but that is actually his name. They were both hired as receptionists for one of my professional services clients. And I was really excited to meet Sarah. Sarah was hired first. And they were telling me about Sarah, about this, finding receptionists is really actually very hard. And they were telling me about this woman, Sarah, that they had found that had 5 years of experience working for a direct competitor. And she was a receptionist. She had, on paper, she was the absolute perfect fit. And so I was excited to meet her the very first day that I walked in and Sarah was working. The elevator doors opened and I walked in, and here's Sarah, literally laying on her desk, not even leaning on her desk, laying on her desk. And I thought, oh my goodness, what's going on with Sarah? And so I walked up to her, I introduced myself, and she just kind of looked at me and she said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes, I'm here to see your CEO, Jamie." "Okay, I'll give him a call." Well, needless to say, Sarah didn't last very long. Despite the fact that she had great skills and experience on paper, 5 years working for a direct competitor, she didn't have the right strengths to be able to do the job. Now, fast forward. Our next receptionist was Jay. Jay has actually been with this company, a company called Northrop, for, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember, over 3 years, I'm sure. Jay has absolutely zero experience as a receptionist. As a matter of fact, Jay is a dancer, and he dances in shows on nights and weekends. And he was looking for a job that had regular work hours that could earn him a steady paycheck and pursue his dance career on the side. Now, you might think, oh, how committed will Jay be? Jay is phenomenally committed. The first day that I met Jay, elevator doors opened. I walked through. Jay looked up at me with this big smile on his face, and he said, "You must be Kim. I understand that you're coming." He gets up, he greets me, he takes me to the room that I'd been going to for about 8 years prior to this, and he says, "You're in the Grafton room today. Now, can I get you a cup of coffee?" Now, that was 3 years ago or so. Jay now knows that I take a strong soy cappuccino in the morning before noon and a green tea with a little bit of honey in the afternoon. He has my training room set up when I come there to train. He anticipates my needs. He is a phenomenal receptionist. So what's the difference between Sarah and Jay? It's not the skills and experience, clearly. It's those innate abilities, those competencies, or what I call strengths. Instead of hiring for equivalent skills and experience, smart managers are identifying the strengths, the competencies, or innate abilities that the right person needs to successfully achieve those target-rich objectives. For Jay, it is the fundamental desire to serve or to support people. He truly loves helping people's lives become easier. He truly loves to support. It's also that ability to juggle multiple priorities, to organize. He's phenomenal with organizing events and different things like that. It's those fundamental strengths that make Jay a receptionist. And most roles, you can train a good part of the role. Now, I'm not saying hire somebody who needs a qualification without the qualification. You just don't have the time or the resources to do that. But as much as you can lower the benchmark on skills and experience and raise the strengths that you look for, you'll actually be able to hire better people. But not only that, you'll have a bigger pool of candidates to choose from. I'd like to share a story about a friend of mine who works for Ericsson. He leads a global team. I believe it's the employee value proposition team. And he and I were talking a few months back, and he said, "Kim," he said, "I just love the idea of your spot on job description." And I'll tell you what that is in a minute. In fact, you'll get a copy of a white paper that I wrote on how to write a spot on job description. He said, "I just love that idea." I said, "Well, what do you love about it, Curtis?" And he said, "Well, we have realized that there are some skills in the market that we're just not going to be able to find. And in addition to that, we have a diversity and inclusion target, like many of you do, I'm sure." He said, "We want to hire a certain percentage of females." Now, our number one, or at least a very heavily a short skill set that we look for very, very frequently are data analysts. And he said, and funnily enough, most data analysts are men. So not only are data analysts difficult to find, the ones that they do find really don't do anything to promote their D&I targets. So he said, what we've decided to do for this role, and it's working out really well, we want to expand it to other roles. And that's why I'm interested in your spot on job description. What we've decided to do is we have decided to target other industries and other functions for some of our roles. For this data analyst role, we've decided to target biologists. I said, why biologists? He said, because they have the ability to deal with a great quantity of data, and many of them have the skills to be able to translate technical data into layman's terms. He said, and that's exactly what we need. So now they're targeting biologists and they're putting them through, I can't remember if he said a 9 or a 13-week training program to train them how to do the data analytics for Ericsson and train them on their technology. It is absolutely phenomenal. Does it cost them money? Of course it does. But they have worked out that filling those roles will actually be more cost effective than leaving them going unfilled, even with the training program. And because they're mostly female, they're helping to meet those D&I targets. So I would encourage you, instead of hiring for equivalent skills and experience, look for the right strengths that are needed. But we all know that the ability to do the job is only part of getting the right person. We also need to hire for culture fit. So what is culture fit? I spent a decade thinking about this very question when I was a recruiter. So I've told you, I've had my own consulting firm for 11 years in April, as a matter of fact, this month. And before that, I spent 15 years as a recruiter. I interviewed over 5,000 people. Remember that, because that will come into play in a few minutes. And during that time, I started teaching managers how to hire. And I knew that I had to teach them how to look for culture fit, other than just, well, I'd like to go out to the bar or the pub on a Friday afternoon and Friday evening and spend time with this person, or I wouldn't mind having them over to their house, which is, let's be honest, what most managers use to gauge culture fit. So spending a decade researching and thinking about this, what I've actually discovered, and what's been proven out in the research, is that the right culture actually comes from having a values alignment. And I'd like to, again, demonstrate the power of a values alignment and a power of defining and articulating organizational values by relating it to a personal story. I grew up in a little town called Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. I'd love to hear from you if you know where Oconomowoc is. Oconomowoc is a little town in Wisconsin outside of Milwaukee, and about the only thing that we're really known for is that, for reasons nobody remember, in 1939 we hosted the world premiere of The Wizard of Oz, which is why we now have our own yellow brick road. So indeed, for me, Oconomowoc is no place like home, because it is home. Recently, in fact, last September, I went back to a pretty significant class reunion. And one of the best things about this weekend is touring our old high school. Now, it hasn't changed much. It's still painted purple and gold. But what has changed is the principal. The principal is a gentleman by the name of Jason George. Now, Jason is a young guy, and he started his career at Oconomowoc teaching social studies. Oconomowoc, like so many small town schools, initially, in fact, for years and years and years, prior to my going to Oconomowoc, during my time at Oconomowoc, and certainly after, we were really known for our innovative programs. We're known for our high test scores, our high graduation rates, and our low truancy rates. But over the last decade, those had started to change. So the school board called Jason and they said, Jason, we would absolutely love to talk to you about taking over as principal. As you know, we have had some problems. Our truancy rates are up, our graduation rates are down, and our test scores are down, and we really would like to make a difference in that. And they said, we're thinking about implementing more rules and regulations. And when you were teaching here, you had a great relationship with the kids, and we'd love to bring you in because they would listen to you and you could help us implement those rules and regulations. And Jason said, whoa, if you want me to make an impact on the things that you want me to make an impact on, and you want to do it by more rules and regulations, I'm not your guy. He said, I think I can do this, but let me tell you how I will do it. And indeed, he was hired and he came in, and the first thing that he did about 2 years ago now, in May, I believe, 2018, he worked with the student body and he developed with the student body 3 values: accountable, committed, and grounded, as you can see here in this picture. He rebranded the school. And he helped students have honest conversations with each other about those values. They bring them to life during a normal school day. So there's no rule against bringing cell phones into the classroom. But if somebody does bring a cell phone into the classroom, you better believe that another kid is going to say, hey, how does that fit in well with the value that we have of accountable? Are you being accountable for learning? And it's working. Graduation rates are going back up, truancy rates going back down, and test scores going back up. Now, interestingly enough, when I was putting this slide deck together, the final slide deck together, I saw this Business Insider article, which was a PwC study that was commissioned by Atlassian, that shows that Gen Ys, millennials, and the Gen Zs or Gen Zs that are entering the workforce now, they would rather quit than stay with a company that doesn't align with their values. So I've got a little bit of homework for you. Define and articulate those values and use them to screen the wrong people out and the right people in. So that brings me to the next question. How do you attract that right person? Well, the research says that one of the best ways to do that is by having a compelling purpose. Now, it turns out that our circle of influence includes 3 different layers of people: ourselves, our family, friends, team, colleagues, and our customer or community at large. When it comes to writing an organizational or position purpose, the research shows that the best ones connect the inner circle, me, directly to that outer circle. What does your company really do to impact your customer or the community at large? How does the person that you want to attract fulfill that purpose? Another piece of homework for you. Do you have what a friend of mine calls a massive transformational purpose? If not, maybe it's time that your organization work on one. And I'll give you a few examples. The first one is a very small, so it doesn't matter what size company you're working in. The first one is a very, very small company. It's a aircraft maintenance organization that works out of a regional airport. Their name is Sigma Aerospace. And a couple of years ago, I helped them craft a purpose, and this was the CEO's wording, and I absolutely love it. Now remember, what they do is they do aircraft maintenance, and their main contract is for Qantas Link, which is the regional carrier in Australia for Qantas. Their purpose, as you can see, we keep people alive by providing world-class, stress-free maintenance repair operations to Qantas Link, to our customers, and they name their customers. The last time I talked to their CEO, they said that that purpose has been very successful in attracting some of the best people in the market away from their competitors. The second is a company that is not a client of mine. They're a very large professional services firm, an engineering consultancy. Their purpose is we shape a better world. And I love that because they do. They help build things. They shape a better world. The hiring process becomes really easy then. You attract the right candidates with a compelling purpose that connects the individual to the customer or community. Then you screen for both a values alignment and the right strengths to successfully achieve those target-rich objectives. One of my free gifts is a white paper that unpacks how to create a very compelling job description that includes those components. A job ad that will magnetically attract the right person while repelling the wrong ones, and will form the foundation to an interview process that will help you screen out the bad from the good that applies. It also has a few case studies that highlight my clients' hiring success, and it's called the Spot On Framework. So again, when I give you the link, you can download that immediately. Now let's go back to our friends at First Mortgage Systems. When they approached me 5 years ago, they had an employee turnover rate of 45%. And we decided that the best approach, first of all, was to help them hire better people, because quite a bit of their turnover was occurring within the first year of employment, and that's not unusual. 22% of employee turnover occurs within the first 45 days of employment. They refined their purpose and value statements, and I taught them how to create spot-ons to advertise their roles, and then using the spot-on framework, I taught their managers how to hire better people. And for that, they reduced immediately, within 6 months, they reduced their employee turnover from 45% down to 30%. So now, let's look at what they did to reduce it even further. Going back to our model, now that you've hired a human who's inspired by your purpose, aligned with your values, and has the right strengths to achieve those target-rich objectives, your role as manager is simply to get out of the way. Let them use the very strengths you hired them for and give them the autonomy to achieve those objectives the best way they know how. Great advice for having a virtual team, by the way. And you, their manager, are there to hold them accountable for achieving their objectives and support and coach them when they need help, praise and advocate for them when they succeed. And the way that you do that is by holding monthly, structured, one-on-one conversations that live in the sweet spot between the needs of the organization, which are those target-rich objectives, and the needs of the individual. But what do your people need to be fully engaged and motivated and to perform at a high level? Well, that little bitty wheel that you see at the bottom, that's a wheel that I call my currencies of choice model. That currencies of choice model is the what you need to talk to them about. Those currencies of choice, remember I said that I was a recruiter for 15 years prior to starting Ignite Global in 2009. Well, as a recruiter, I interviewed over 5,000 people. And the very first model that I created to help organizations like yours engage and retain and motivate people was me unpacking those 5,000 exit interviews, because if you think about it, 5,000 people walked into my office and told me why they wanted to leave their manager. And I reverse engineered those, and I came up with these currencies of choice. Now, I have checked these currencies of choice against the latest research time and time again, and it absolutely stacks up. So pause me and take a look at them now, but you will get this as a free gift as well. So you'll have a soft copy if you download the resources. So go ahead and pause me if you like. And don't forget to fill in that handout as we go along. It'll help you remember this model. So many of you are thinking, why monthly and why conversations? Let me answer the last question first. Why conversations? There's a lot of research that says that the most important thing to increase employee engagement and productivity, motivation and performance is the connection between manager and direct report. And in fact, the Gallup organization has done more research than probably any other organization on the planet about all things human capital. And a couple of years ago, their chief researcher, a gentleman by the name of Jim Harder, walked into the CEO, Jim Clifton's office and said, Jim, I have now been able to, without a doubt, give an opinion, give a research-based, fact-based opinion on what the number one thing, the key to employee retention, employee engagement, employee productivity, and motivation is. It's the manager. So they wrote a book about it. I actually heard Jim Clifton tell that story at a Gallup event last July. But that's not the only point of research that shows that. In 2016, the Navalent Corporation concluded a 10-year study called What Great Executives Know and Do that was written up by HBR, Harvard Business Review. And they said that there were 4 key characteristics for great executives. I'm only going to talk about the 4th one because they said that the 4th one is the most important of those 4, but also that it translates to all line of leaders or managers, all levels. And that is that they form deep connections with superiors, peers, and direct reports, studying and meeting the needs of those key stakeholders. Well, you've already got the needs of the key stakeholders, don't you? It's the currencies of choice model. And I believe that connection begins with conversation. So that's why I highly, highly, highly suggest monthly structured one-on-ones. Now let's talk about why they should be monthly. I've done a lot of work in this area. I've developed a conversational framework program, and I have rolled it out to dozens of organizations over the last 7 years. And I've rolled it out under every conceivable format that you could possibly look for. I've had managers, I've given them the IP and had them just say, use it as you will, make it your own. And I wanted to give them autonomy. And I thought that that would be a way that would help them embrace it more. Turns out people need structure. So I found it much more useful to give them a structure to follow, but also to have them do it monthly, because then it just becomes a regular meeting cadence. It becomes the way things are done around here. You know as well as I do that annual performance reviews are really almost a thing of the past. Everybody hates to do them, and they've been proven to be ineffective. Monthly structured conversations, if you use all of the currencies of choice and you talk about the needs of the organization, those target-rich objectives, which is the currency of choice at the number 6 position on that currencies of choice wheel, and the needs of the individual, which are all the other currencies of choice, you will be hitting those needs of the key stakeholders. This is especially critical while we are all sequestered and working from home, or at least those of us who can work from home, to have regular conversations with the staff. Now, in terms of COVID-19, while we are all on lockdown, I would highly suggest talking to them face-to-face on a daily basis, at least initially, but also having those structured conversations using those currencies of choice at least monthly. And again, monthly is just the way things become, the way things are done around here. So it's much easier to implement at the end of the day than even quarterly are. And if you'd like to talk to me about that directly or ask me any questions, you'll get my contact details at the end. I'd love to hear from you because I know that this is an area that I get a little bit of pushback from time to time on. This is, by the way, going back to our friends at First Mortgage, how they further reduced their employee turnover from 30%, where we got it to after they implemented the spot-on job descriptions and the spot-on hiring process, to 20%. Now it's gone back up to 22%, and they're happy with that. They're really happy with that because the industry itself, because it's a very call center oriented and document processing environment, the industry itself has much higher turnover than the 22%. By the way, their employee engagement scores, they've gone up as well. So the unified theory of everything people is your survival guide for the future of work. It will help you thrive through the roaring 20s, and it disrupts every outdated and ineffective people practice you might still be hanging on to. It will help you handle any disruptions thrown at you by technology, globalization, pandemics, you name it. So remember, start with replacing those task-based job descriptions with 5 or fewer outcomes that are written in real language and measurable. Then decide on the strengths that the right people need to successfully achieve those outcomes. Attract the right people with the purpose, make sure they have a values alignment, and then just get out of the way. Talk to them on a monthly basis using that currencies of choice model, and support and coach them when they need help. Praise and appreciate them when they do well. This is especially important in this chaotic time. People need support, but they also need praise. And even in non-chaotic times, praise and appreciation is always, always, always one of the top engagement factors. I'm really excited to have had the opportunity to share my unified theory of everything people with you. And to be honest and transparent, I love working with organizations that are future focused and committed to making a difference in these areas. And if you're watching this video, you're one of those. If you have any questions, or if there are things that are bubbling up for you from this presentation, I'd love to continue this conversation, see if we can do some work together, if there's anything that I can do to support or help you. So please reach out. You see both my US and my Australian phone numbers on the screen. But don't go away yet, because I'm about to give you that link to download the free resources. And there it is. It's a bit.ly link, so it's just bit.ly/unified theory. You don't have to capitalize. You probably know that already, being the tech-savvy individuals that you are. It is my sincere pleasure to have been able to bring you this presentation. I really wish that I could have appeared in front of you in person, and I hope to meet you someday. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or anything that you want to chat about. I'd love to see if I can help. Thanks so much for your time and attention.